think a lot of that pivot was enabled by the fact that we're so focused on Gen Z. And that was a big change, right? Like
Mm,
especially Hollister is, I mean, obsessively focused on Gen Z. And that means that
yeah,
like our insights engines are all built around Gen Z, which means they're all inherently digital. So, you know,
yeah,
things that might have set I think other brands, other organizations back, like our set of brands already had an online research community that had over 1,500 Gen Z consumers in them. We were already talking to them digitally. We were already running digital focus groups. We were already gathering insights and running ideas by them. So a lot of the pivots and the plans were made easier by the fact that we were already set up from an insights perspective with this really powerful engine. Um, and then I think the other big part of the pivot was Gen Z is inherently digital, right? It's kind of the
yep,
most common
yep,
and rote thing to say, but um, building plans to go where they already are, whether that's across a lot of the platforms that you talk about all the time, right? TikTok and Instagram, working more closely with Snap. So a lot of those pivots were already made a lot easier because that's where Gen Z naturally moved to when the world shut down.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny to think about kind of one of the things that's really interesting for me is like I worked at Abercrombie and Hollister when I was in like high school. Like work was like the first retail job I had.
Yeah,
And it's weird to think about kind of as a brand, that means that you're going through like constant reinvention, right? Because if you want to stay, if that's a consumer base that you're targeting and working with, it's not the same. Like I'm not there anymore, right? Like I don't buy
right.
Hollister anymore. That's not not my age group. And so how do you kind of, and that age group moves really fast, right? Like that things change very, very quickly. So so when you're talking about these kind of consumer insights, I think you'd mentioned in other interviews that kind of unearthing consumer insights was something that you learned, particularly during your first kind of 8 years or so on the advertising side. But talk to me about that group of 1,500, and talk to me about what are some of the ways that you figure that out, right? Like how do you stay cool? How do you stay relevant with an age group that graduates high school every 4 years,
Yeah,
right?
oh, it's interesting. I think like you said, even taking it back a couple steps further, one of the things that's so interesting and why I love this industry so much, right, is even going back to college, which is going way back. But like the start of a lot of this kind of obsession with consumers, which is so important now, right? And I think I'd be lying if I said that my team and the people around me don't try and keep me young, which is I'm very thankful for. Um, but like even going back to college, like I was an anthropology major, and at the end of
Hmm.
the day, like that idea of obsessing what makes people think, and obsessing um, not just what people think, but why they think that. And I think there's that has kind of led to that's led to I don't know, the last 20 years of constantly being checking in on consumers. I think I'm still a big believer, as much as possible, of observing what people actually do. Um,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm. Not what they say, but what they actually do.
Yeah, and so like we right now we have, like I said, we have a couple of great things. We have this online community across the U.S. and U.K. We have a brand agent program, which is a high school kids all over the country that are actually part of our brand, and we use them a number of different ways. One is to always gathering insights, asking them questions, and they're kind of our eyes and ears on the ground. Um, in high schools specifically, right? So that's like right at that sweet spot of Gen Z, right in the middle. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, I always kind of come back to this idea of like whenever possible to observe and making sure that we understand what's happening in real time with people, right? Whether that's market visits, store visits, being with consumers in their native environments. You mentioned going back to back in the day, but I remember one of the most interesting pieces, and again, like these kind of unlocks, right? These ahas for me. I don't know if hopefully they're interesting for other people. Um, we had this
Yeah.
client that didn't like any of the work we were doing. This is back when I was in advertising, and they were a packaged good, they were a food packaged good, and they didn't like any of the work we were doing. because it didn't work. So they liked the work, right? They liked the work and they bought the work and we made the work and then it didn't work. And finally, we said, we're listening. We do all this focus groups. We do the study. We're testing the packaging. We're running ads by people. What is happening? And honestly, finally, we went to the grocery store, and it was low key, a little creepy. But like we just sat, we sat in the grocery store in the pasta sauce aisle for a half a day. And we watched people, we watched moms and dads come in and families come in, and they would walk through and they would go through and they would pick up the product and they'd look at it and then they'd look at the price and they'd put it back. And they would do it over and over and over again. And it's so interesting, like this idea of insights. It's not just like on a consumer level, because we asked people too. We said, hey, like we work for this advertising agency. Notice you picked up this product. Why did you put it back? And they're like, oh, my kids love my kids love that product, but like, we're on a budget for meals. And this is just, it doesn't enable us to like, this is just too expensive to get all the pieces. So we choose this one. And we took that back to the client. We said, hey, we spent a day in a grocery store and we know why. It's a price thing, right? Like we're talking to a certain family in a certain way, but the price is not in line with that. And they didn't believe us. And they're like, no, we've done all the pricing. Like, and I understand a lot more now that I'm on the client side as well, but they're like, no, we've done all the pricing analytics. We've done all the metrics. We know exactly like how much to cost. This is the margin. This is how much we should be pushing the product for. And in the end, we took them to the grocery store and gave them $10 and said, you need to buy a meal for 4. Like go, I think there were like 8 or 9 of them. Yeah. We said like, go buy things, get your sauce and get the pasta and get everything else and bring it back and then check out. And none of the 8 came back with their own sauce in hand because they couldn't actually buy it. They couldn't afford it. They couldn't put the full meal together. And they all came back with like a different kind of the product that they were trying to sell. And so I love coming back to that story because I feel like that's when you feel like you've exhausted qualitative, quantitative, you've researched, you've talked. At the end of the day, like going and observing how people use or don't use your product and what they like, how they actually like feel about it when they see it, I think is so invaluable. And it keeps coming up over and over again. I was really young and it was in a different country, but I keep coming back to that story.